next one is definitely in my mind, as a concerned parent, a public health issue that needs to be discussed as well. Again, this is another one that the discussions are happening in different towns throughout the state, so it's not just Shrewsbury, but like now you have Concord talking about fluoride, Holyoke. Worcester doesn't fluorinate, and they've had 5 attempts to try to fluorinate, and they've defeated all 5 times, so they don't fluorinate, and Springfield doesn't fluorinate. So it is, again, another issue like that. This one comes down mainly to personal choice and informed consent, because as fluoride is added to the drinking water, it becomes your informed consent is taken away from you. It's put into the water. It's a form of mass medication where you're giving the same amount to everybody. And if you look across the population, different people that you can't control the dose. So as you deliver, this delivery mechanism is used through the water. You can't control the dose to the infants that are drinking, mixing the formula up in bottles, which you've had the ADA and CDC recommend not to use all fluorinated water when you mix up the formula, because you could risk more dental fluorosis, which is the side effect to having fluoride in the water and ingesting it. So this petition is more along the lines of dealing with ingesting fluoride and not so much the topical use. So, brushing your teeth, spitting it out, how it's used, at the dentist and everything, I'm not addressing. It's more putting this into the water. And actually, there's 2 different types of fluoride. There's pharmaceutical-grade fluoride that you find in your toothpaste, and then there's the fluoride you find in your drinking water. And the fluoride you find in your drinking water is actually a hazardous waste byproduct of the phosphate fertilizer industry. And by being hazardous, I mean it is been classified as a neurotoxin, similar to mercury, lead. There's not many developmental neurotoxins, so this one is actually categorized as developmental neurotoxin. So I think by not being able to have the choice and having to ingest it, where the CDC when water fluoridation, if I take a step back, when water fluoridation began in the 40s, there wasn't all these sources of fluoride at the time that they did it. So when they put it into the water, that was the only source. Now we have a lot more sources of fluoride. You brush your teeth with it. You can't filter it out, so carbon filters don't filter out fluoride. So you get it when you cook, and all different ways that you get this fluoride. So without being able to control the dose and ingesting it, so they originally thought that when you needed to ingest fluoride in order to get the benefit from it. But what they've learned, and the CDC acknowledged in 1999, is that the benefit is mostly topical. So, and what's interesting about that is if the benefit is mostly topical, but the side effects are when you ingest it, and when it's a systematic thing where you actually ingest it, it goes into your blood, into your bones, it becomes a bigger issue. And I think it really comes down to personal choice. If you don't agree or you agree, I still think choice is the issue here. Where if you don't want to have fluoride, then you should have the choice and not be mandated to have it. And I wanted to note that the Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, does not mandate water fluoridation. The Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, does not mandate water fluoridation. The American Dental Association, the ADA, does not mandate water fluoridation. The federal government does not mandate water fluoridation, and the state government does not mandate water fluoridation in Massachusetts. So it comes down to the town of Shrewsbury itself is mandating it on its citizens. So I think it becomes that we have more of the decision here at the town, which is why I wanted to bring it forward for discussion. And myself, I don't necessarily like the idea of ingesting it. I would rather not, so that's why I'm bringing it forward, because I think that, like the CDC says, the CDC's own research says that now 41% of teenagers have dental fluorosis, which is the outward sign of fluoride overexposure in younger years when your teeth were in formation, which is kind of the spotted or speckled, the teeth in there. So I think if there's a side effect to it, and there's some benefit to it, but you can maybe have another option like other towns do where you have a voluntary, through the school program, anybody that wanted to have something, maybe we can investigate that. But I think as far as just putting it out there and not allowing people to choose is what this is trying to address.
Thank you. Ms. King.
Dan, is there a history of, has this been brought forth to town meeting before, this notion of fluoride in the water?
No, actually, the town meeting voted to put fluoride into the water March 17th, 1952, March 17th or 18th, 1952. That process started in 1953, 1954 timeframe, and it's been ever since then.
And so we've never discussed it before back at town meeting once it's been done that we're...
It was debated at town meeting. Doctor spoke and
Sure.
Person in opposition spoke and called the vote, and it was approved at town meeting.
Is there any reason why, from the town's perspective, your perspective, that it should be kept in the water supply?
From an operational standpoint, no.
Or from a Board of Health? Does anyone weigh in on this at the town level in terms of...
The town weighed in on it back in 52, and it's been happening since 52, and whether or not it's ever been discussed previous town meetings, I defer to people who've been going to town meetings for a long time.
I'm just wondering currently, given that between 1952 and now that we have this in front of us, is there an opinion?
No, there's never been any substantial inquiry. I might have had a conversation with a resident here and there over the past 17 or 18 years.
I'm more asking you at this moment in time what your thought is on this, and what's the town...
You're asking what my thought is? Well, I think the water department's position would be, and this is the water department's position, not the Board of Selectmen's position, but the water department's position, would be that they'll put fluoride in the water if they're told to put fluoride in the water. If they're told not to put fluoride in the water, they will not put fluoride in the water. It's strictly a policy issue. Operationally, not putting fluoride in the water is an advantage because that's something less that we have to do. There is an expense associated with it, but putting fluoride in the water is not something that is a huge effort for us, but it requires some effort, it requires some expense. We have to buy the material. We have $20,000 to $25,000 in the budget for material, and then it's the equipment and the time. It's the monitoring of it, just like we have to monitor all the other material that we put into the stream, the water itself. It does affect the chemistry of the water, so we have to deal with that. Anytime you add anything to the water, you have to deal with the chemistry aspects of it. But it's not something that has ever come to the top of anyone's to-do list. Hey, we've got to do something about fluoride.
Thank you.
Ms. Vetter.
Well, again, Mr. Moss, thank you for bringing this before us. I think it's time that we did have a discussion about this. If it turns out the last time we talked about it was in 1952, I'm really not up on this. I did do some cursory research, online, because I knew that this was here. What I found was, in the 90s and then in 2011, there was a lot of conversation about fluoride being linked with cancer, and nothing has ever been proven that it is or that it's necessarily bad for you. I do find it very interesting, though, that Worcester does not put it in their water, and I don't know if there's any data that will allow us to know if the citizens of Worcester have increased cavities above other towns in Massachusetts that have fluoride in their water or not. So I don't know about that. But I do know that, I really don't know. In 1952, I believe that they probably did not have fluoride in the toothpaste back then. They probably didn't have the fluoride rinses that you can get at Target because there wasn't a Target, but you probably didn't have those. I know dentists now seal children's teeth. So there's a lot of things that we're doing that I'm making an assumption that wasn't done in 1952. And I guess it does bother me that we are putting something in the water that really may not be necessary to go into the water. So if you put on your finance committee hat, it's an expense that maybe we don't have to have. And, you know, I too am a parent, and, you know, why are we having people ingest things that maybe isn't necessary? So I really don't know how I feel about this. I feel like I don't have enough information, but I am sort of feeling, particularly with Worcester not doing this. Are there other towns? I know you cited Worcester. Are there other towns throughout Massachusetts that are not doing this?
Yes. Yep. I wish I had it off the top of my head, the percentage. But Springfield does not fluorinate its water. A lot of fluoridation you can see is concentrated around the Boston Metro West area and outward towards Shrewsbury, and then it kind of, the rest of the state is kind of more in the voluntary.
If you go to the pediatrician's office, they generally all have on their wall the list of towns that fluorinate their water and those that don't.
Okay.
It always gets asked, because if you're not in one of those towns, then they write you a prescription for fluoride tablets. If you are in one of those towns, they tell you.
And that's
you're
what
all
I'm
set.
thinking, though, but that's actually what I'm thinking is there are other methods that can be taken. The other thing is there are a number of people who have wells that aren't, you know, on town water, so they're not getting the benefit. If there is benefit, they're not getting the benefit of the fluoride. So, you know, I guess I've got a little time between now and town meeting. I really don't know how I'm going to vote on this. But again, clearly, thank you for bringing this to us, and I do think it's something that we should be talking about.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just, sorry. There are 140 water systems in Massachusetts that put fluoride in the water. It's something that, there are 351 cities and towns. Now, obviously, many of those communities are MWRA communities, and some of the MWRA does not put fluoride in its water directly, but there are communities that take water from MWRA and add fluoride. So, it's really, I don't think this is an argument that I could suggest that since the city of Worcester doesn't do it, we shouldn't do it, or the town of Northborough doesn't, so we should do it. I think it's something that people in Shrewsbury, you know, decided in 1952. We think this is important, and subsequent town meetings since 1952 have affirmed that. Each year when you vote the water budget, you vote and reaffirm putting fluoride in the water. That's what town meeting's all about. Now, the position of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, public health, is fluoride in the water is a good thing. And you will hear between now and town meeting a number of people who will be writing or speaking to the finance committee that will indicate that they feel that fluoride should continue for a whole lot of reasons. You're going to hear from a great number of doctors. You're going to hear from a great number of dental professionals, as is the Board of Health will be hearing, because now apparently discussion went out in some fashion today because we got a call today from someone saying, is this fluoride been all about? We think fluoride should be in the water. So I don't think, again, you know, respectfully to say, not to disparaging the city of Worcester, but because the city of Worcester doesn't put fluoride in its water, I don't think that's a reason for us not to. The fluoride issue in the city of Worcester is something that has popped up before the Worcester City Council numerous times. Something sort of runs on a cyclical fashion. Every X number of years, this issue comes up. From the material that you've seen, you know that the ultimate authority on whether or not fluoride is in the water or not is the Board of Health. The Board of Health has the ability under state law to mandate fluoride in the water. And there's a mechanism for them to do that. So, that being said, 140 water systems. I've worked for 5 communities. Previous community that didn't put fluoride in the water. Shrewsbury puts fluoride in the water. They're very much a local control issue.
Mr. Budenhagen.
I
Thank
took
you,
the
Mr. McGovern.
opportunity yesterday to go and talk with a dentist and a hygienist. The dentist has been here about 15 years. The hygienist has been practicing about 32 years. And all they had was pluses that it was in the water system. And they gave examples of the young children coming up through their practice and the number of years that they had serviced these individuals, young people right up through adults. And they said it was the best decision that the town of Shrewsbury had ever made. And they also mentioned another benefit from this was the bone structure of young people growing up, that this had a great plus factor in their health chain. So I will be voting against it. I believe that it should be left in the water system.
Can I add something to that? Would that be all right? So just because we're bringing up other health issues, and actually because we're bringing up the timing of this, one of the reasons I'm bringing it up is because, science is kind of dynamic, where we find things out that we didn't know before. And I'm new to this process too, but one of the things that I just did recently this week was also sent my concern to the Board of Health, because I'm learning about, it's really well known about how to get it into the water, but maybe not how to get it out of the water. So when I've heard about the town meeting warrant and trying to get that in, it's really because there's been more recent findings. And so what I've sent to the Board of Health is that there are 3 new findings. So this is where I think it might be the difference, where there's a lot of history to it, but there's a lot of new things to it. And just recently, because I mentioned that it's in 2014, I think earlier in 2012, but I reaffirmed in 2014, that it's been deemed the developmental neurotoxin. So that's new. And just recently this year, there have been 2 new studies that have come out. One is a finding from England that fluoride is associated with hypothyroidism, which in turn can also damage children's brains, just like being a neurotoxin itself. And then there's a finding as well that water fluoridation is associated with an increased incidence of attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. So again, these are, you could say single studies. I mean, there is a big body of past science out there, and I don't want to dispute that or what those qualified professionals are saying, but I do think there is some new studies coming out that might warrant being concerned about it and what are next steps on it. So one of the things we might do is, if we're in doubt and those people can't make an informed consent decision, to say, well, there might be these side effects, how bad those side effects are, what they are. Given a choice, when some news comes out like this, I might say, well, I don't want to ingest fluoride based on this new findings that are coming out, very new findings. So that's really why it's bringing it now at this time. So it kind of addresses the time factor and maybe some of the health issues or side effects that may be coming out in a newer sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Skelnick.
In regards to your comment, Dan, on the Board of Health, I think you said the state law kind of mandates that the Board of Health can decide to put fluoride in or not.
Right.
So if this article were to pass, the Board of Health could still override it, is what you're saying?
Well, again, I think hypothetical. I think it is a hypothetical question. I think that the Board of Health will weigh in on it at some point in time. And after the fact, town meeting. This is a non-binding resolution here. I think the intent is to start the conversation. The way to handle fluoride in the water, obviously, is through the legislative process relative to the budget. So it's non-binding. I think the purpose, the gentleman, I think, is seeking conversation and an action. If the town meeting were to vote affirmative on this resolution, then I think there would be some mechanism established to try to ascertain what, in fact, is the public interest. It's not. I think it's all conjecture. The Board of Health hasn't even met to discuss this. This came in, I think, on the last day. It came in the day of, or the day before the board signed the warrants. It was still very, very new.
Okay.
If you'd like, I can sort of give you a flavor of the discussion that took place in 1952, if you'd like.
Oh, wow.
Yes, no?
Not for me, no, I
No,
don't care.
it's irrelevant. It was 1952.
It's
I
kind of-
wasn't even born in
I think it's
1952.
kind of, it's kind of interesting conversation they had, that's all.
Let's hear it then. I mean, if
No.
you research it, we really should hear it.
Again, the petition was brought by Dr. Martin, who said that it was a good thing. In correct proportion, he said the addition of fluorine would be helpful in preventing tooth decay. He moved that $4,000 be appropriated in order to get the process going. Mrs. Dudley then opposed the adoption of the article, citing evidence to prove that fluorine was harmful and not to answer the tooth care. After further discussion, a motion was made and seconded that would take an immediate vote. Someone moved the question. So voted. It was then moved that the motion previously made be adopted, and that was so voted.
The internet is a remarkable thing, isn't it? That was very interesting. You were correct, Mr. Morgado. Thank you.
I'm glad you indulged me. Thank you very much.
I think my libertarian bent thinks, why is the government giving me medicine I didn't ask for? And then I think that, gee, children having less cavities is probably a good thing, so then I'm opposed to this. And I go back and forth, and then I realize that I don't really care what the town does with this. It's fluorine. It's a nasty chemical that maybe we have a few less deliveries coming in to town of this. Fluoride really is a nasty, caustic chemical. And I think I'm going to abstain from this vote myself. I think this is better decided by people who actually do care which way this goes. I really find myself, whichever way that the good people of town meeting vote is fine with me. Ms. Vedder.
So actually, this is more of a procedural question than about the fluoride itself. But, I mean, this petition is written, and then it says further resolve that Shrewsbury Town Meeting calls upon the town of Shrewsbury to ban I can't say the word now, fluoridation of its public water supply. So I guess I don't think the way that this is written is just to have a conversation. I think the petition was written to have town meeting agree that they no longer want fluoride in the water. So if the town meeting was to vote in favor of this, I understand that based on what you said, that the state says the Board of Health could then come in and say, well, town meeting, we have the authority, and we're going to go ahead and put the fluoride in your water, even though you voted against it. But it sounds to me as if this passes, then town meeting saying we're not putting fluoride in the water.
No.
No?
What town meeting's saying is town meeting calls upon the town of Shrewsbury to ban fluoridation, okay? Town meeting then has to decide, what are you going to do with the water budget?
That was going to be my next question. Is the way to do this to actually, when water appears in the discussion of Article 6,
Yeah.
does someone bring forward a motion to delete the amount of $25,000?
That's the traditional role of the legislative body, isn't it? Control.
And that would be the way to get rid of fluoride in this.
That's correct. That's why the
I was watching at home who was a town
I rented
meeting.
the 1952 piece, but that's what they did. Town meeting said, hey, guess what? We're going to have fluoridation. Here's $4,000.
So you're saying even if this petition was to pass, that unless somebody makes a motion to reduce the appropriation for fluoride, it's still going to go in the water?
It's still going to go in the water based upon the fact that town meeting would have voted an appropriation to put fluoride in the water.
Okay, well, that's good that we had this conversation then in case it does pass.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So given the fact that this is Article 14, and the water budget's going to be under Article 6, then shouldn't we, so then somebody at town meeting would need to know to make the motion to take fluoride out of the water budget before we have discussion on Article 14?
They could. Or you could vote the water budget, and then Article 14 passes, and then the Board of Selectmen tells me, look, policy, take fluoride out of the water. Right? So the water department takes fluoride out of the water. This is a very simple question.
Mr. Segal?
Mechanics, I would suggest you don't get bogged down in mechanics.
Well, it just feels like
Bogged down
there's,
on the issue.
it just feels like you're saying that mechanics, if town meeting was to indicate that they did not want fluoride in the water, it almost sounds to me like there could be some mechanics here, well, too bad, in Article 6 you voted for fluoride, so it's going in.
Yeah. I've been in Shrewsbury now almost 18 years, and I've never heard anyone say to the town meeting, that's too bad, we're gonna do something totally different.
Well, that's what I would hope, but that's not what I thought you said earlier.
I haven't heard that conversation ever in Shrewsbury. So, you asked me a hypothetical question.
Okay.
If you ask me a hypothetical question, I have to give you a hypothetical answer. If I want to take it to the nth degree, what I would say is that town meeting votes the article, you take the money out of the article, right? Board of Selectmen says, take fluoride out of the water, and then the Board of Health says, no, we want fluoride in the water. So if you want to take a hypothetical, then he's rioting in the streets. We want to take it to the next, I think we want to be adults here and realistic.
All right, so is it fair to say then, because, I think Mr. Moss said that, he's just learning how to do this. Let's say that Article 14 passes. At that point, if he had a town meeting member asked to revisit Article 6, would that be an appropriate move at that point?
Town meeting can do anything.
Okay. Mr. Moss, hopefully you heard what I just said.
Article 6.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, Mr. Moss, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you
for
very
your
much.
diligence.
Thank you for your feedback, everyone.
Are you a town meeting member, sir?
I hope to be.
Good for you. Thank you.
Good.